There are two significant equations we need to know for this class. The first one is cellular respiration, which we've already spoke about. The second one is this equation right here, which is the carbonic acid-bicarbonate equation. And it is as follows. When CO2 reacts with water, it's going to produce carbonic acid, which will immediately dissociate into bicarbonate and the hydrogen ion. This equation obeys the laws of mass balance, meaning it wants to be in equilibrium and balanced on each side of the equation. So if there's more on the left side of the equation, it's going to move to the right to balance it out. And vice versa, if there are more substances on the right side of the equation, it'll automatically move to the left to balance it out. This is a carbonic acid bicarbonate equation. This right here is carbonic acid, and this molecule right here is bicarbonate. Okay, so let's take a look at some variables when things change in our body. One of which is when there's an increase in CO2. If we have an increase in CO2 in our body, it's going to cause this equation to be heavily weighted on the left side of this equation. And once again, as we suggested at the outset, this equation wants to remain balanced. So there's two ways to rectify this situation. Move this equation to the right. And by doing that, it's decreasing CO2 on the left side. But the other side of that coin, it's increasing everything on the right side. And what you see here is I've made a really large hydrogen ion right here. Certainly it's going to produce more bicarbonate when it's shifting to the right, but bicarbonate is by and large irrelevant because there is so much bicarbonate in the body. 6,000 times higher concentration of bicarbonate in the body than the hydrogen ion. So increasing bicarbonate does not have an impact, and that's why I did not reflect an increase in bicarbonate in this equation right here. But there's certainly an increase in the hydrogen ion. So by shifting to the right in this equation, trying to achieve balance, we have a problem because now we have an increase in the hydrogen ion concentration in the body, otherwise known as a decrease in pH in the body. And a decrease in pH, like we've discussed in previous videos, can cause problems with proteins and cause proteins to denature. If proteins are denaturing, they aren't functioning as they're supposed to be functioning. So there's another better option for this. As we can see in this next scene, if we get rid of the CO2 before it has the opportunity to move to the right, we will not have an increase in the hydrogen ion concentration in the body. And we can get rid of CO2 merely by breathing it off, by exhalation. Every time we exhale, we're getting rid of CO2. When we inhale, we're taking in oxygen. That's how we get our oxygen. But we get rid of CO2 by exhaling. So exhaling is one of our prime mechanisms for maintaining pH homeostasis in the body. The question is, what is the number one contributor to increases in the hydrogen ion concentration in the body? Another way of saying that, what is the main impetus for a decrease in pH in the body? And the answer is CO2. Specifically, we get CO2 from cellular respiration. This is an incomplete cellular respiration equation, but I just wanted to throw that up there to show the more metabolic reactive our cells are in producing ATP, the more CO2 they are going to produce. That CO2 is going to react with water. And just so we're clear, it's not necessarily this water right here. Our body, once again, is 60% water, so it has no trouble finding a water to react with. When CO2 reacts with water, as we suggested, it makes carbonic acid, bicarbonate, and the hydrogen ion. So our body has mechanisms to prevent any major changes in the hydrogen ion concentration. The first one, and this is in no particular order, are chemical buffers. Within cells, we have the phosphate ions that are floating around that act as a chemical buffer. And what we mean by a chemical buffer is they grab onto a hydrogen ion. If a chemical buffer, such as the phosphate ion, grabs onto the hydrogen ion does not contribute to the pH of the body, and more importantly, it doesn't cause problems with proteins. Another intracellular chemical buffer is hemoglobin, and we tend to think of hemoglobin as the oxygen transporting protein within red blood cells, and that's certainly true. But in addition to that, it binds the hydrogen ion to function as a chemical buffer. The second way is the one we've already talked about, which is exhalation. That is getting rid of CO2. In these first two, we are not getting rid of the hydrogen ion. It's really just changing forms or being bound up with another molecule or ion, phosphate ion, hemoglobin, or being converted into CO2 to be breathed out. When I say converted, that equation would be shifting to the left. As we breathe out more CO2, that equation keeps moving to the left to keep that equation in balance. When I say that equation, I'm specifically talking about the carbonic acid-bicarbonate equation. But there is one way in the body that we can actually directly get rid of the hydrogen ion, and that's the renal system, specifically the kidneys and the nephrons within the kidneys that directly get rid of the hydrogen ion. That's pH homeostasis, significantly important in the body, and we will return to this many times in subsequent videos. Thank you. Enjoy your evening.